we're very happy today to have you here, Christina, to talk about the immigration programs and policies especially for international students. Can you spend some time just, kind of go through your background, who you are, and so our audience can actually know you better, and also maybe introduce a little bit about your firm, Grant Spiegel, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name is Christina Guida, and I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer. I've been practicing now for 6 years, and I do all areas of Canadian immigration and Canadian citizenship. So I help clients with visitor visas, with study permits, with work permits, permanent residency under all the categories, as well as citizenship. So it's full service from beginning to end. Prior to becoming a lawyer, I worked for the Canada Border Services Agency as an enforcement officer, and I did that for about 5 years. So I'm well versed in how the Canadian government works and how they think, which is always an asset when I'm helping clients, because it allows me to see the full picture and make sure that I'm dealing with all of the issues properly, and ensuring that there's no issues like inadmissibility issues or anything to do with enforcement. So that's always a nice thing to have in terms of making sure that your clients have full visibility. I've had all of my immigration legal training at Green & Spiegel. So Green & Spiegel is the oldest and largest boutique immigration firm in Canada. It was founded by Mr. Mendel Green back in the 1960s. And we practice exclusively in Canadian immigration law as well. So that's all we do. We breathe, sleep, eat Canadian immigration. As I said, I've been there for 6 years. And we're about 15 lawyers, and our firm is over 100 people, and we speak over 80 languages between the lawyers and the staff. So we provide full service in that regard. And we're about 15 lawyers, and we all work exclusively in Canadian immigration, with some of us specializing in certain areas. Me in particular, I do full service apart from, issues related Quebec, which is its own nice little area of Canadian immigration law, but we do have lawyers in our firm that do specialize in that area.
It's kind of funny when you mentioned you worked for CBSA before, because as a former international student, when I hear CBSA, we're like, oh my God, that's the first group of Canadian we meet when we enter the country. So
exactly.
Yeah. So all this memories kind of come back vividly. It's a great opportunity for international students to kind of like ask all the questions. We have a lot of questions waiting for you. The first question I have for you, a lot of people are asking, including myself. We're in a very special time right now due to the global pandemic, and a lot of students are being either concerned or curious about the Canadian immigration law or trends. So how do you think the COVID-19 situation is affecting the Canadian immigration policies, especially the study permit, postgraduate work permits, and permanent residency?
Yeah, so I mean, COVID-19 has definitely changed our lives on a day-to-day basis, and it's obviously changed our lives from an immigration perspective. So as of March 16th, the Canadian government placed a travel ban in Canada, so meaning that in very limited circumstances are immigrants allowed to come to Canada. So now specifically with students or with workers, in their particular case, if you had a study permit approved or you had a study permit in hand before March 18th of 2020, you're able to travel to Canada. If you do not have that approval in hand or your study permit in hand, or if you got it after March 18th of 2020, right now you're not able to travel to Canada. Now there's limited exceptions in terms of who is able to travel to Canada. So if you're the spouse of a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, you are exempt from that travel ban. But again, it's in very discretionary circumstances. The Canadian government is essentially saying, we're putting a pause on things right now in terms of you coming into Canada just because they're trying to get a hold of what's going on with the pandemic. So they don't want you to travel to Canada unless it's an absolute emergency. And they're also cognizant of the fact that, you know, things happen so quickly, and, you know, people may have been on March break, or they may have been, you know, abroad to visit their family because there was a pause in school. So they were, you know, they were sensitive to that and said, okay, basically, if you were here before March 18th, if you had your study permit before March 18th, you're allowed to come back in. And if you haven't, that's okay. You can stay abroad, and you can continue your studies while you're abroad. So as we know, a lot of the colleges and universities right now have transferred to online courses, just like you and I are right now. A lot of the teaching is exactly this way. So what the Canadian government has said is that basically this will not affect a student's ability to qualify for their study permit. So it won't affect their study permit or their ability to get a study permit. And most importantly, it's not going to affect their eligibility for a postgraduate work permit. Because as we know, one of the conditions of the postgraduate work permit is that you have to be in Canada studying on a full-time basis, complete studies, and then apply for your postgrad work permit. So anybody who's here right now, or is not here right now, because of the pandemic and because of the travel ban, but are studying abroad and are doing their online courses, as long as 50% of their courses, it's not more than 50% of their courses are done online or abroad, they can still qualify for the postgraduate work permit. So as we've seen right now, I have friends who work in the colleges and universities, so they know for sure September is happening virtually. And I think it was just confirmed in some of the colleges. Like one of my friends is a professor at Simon Fraser, and they've said actually the winter semester will also be online. So at least for a university student, it's 1 year out of the, out of a 4-year program, so they're okay. A college student as well, if they have a 2-year program, they're spending their first year doing it virtually, they're okay based on the standards now. If the travel ban doesn't get lifted, I'm very confident that the government will be sensitive to students' situations, because ultimately Canada relies on students, because students are one of the #1 groups of people that ultimately become permanent residents, and Canada relies heavily on immigration, and it's something that they support. Before all of this happened, before COVID-19 and the travel bans came into place, the Minister of Immigration, Marco Mendicino, actually released a report and a press release to say that the numbers this year for immigration were going to be increasing even more. So, Canada really relies on immigration, and specifically on students, because it's a young workforce, and that's what Canada needs to continue to build the economy, and then these individuals and students building their futures in Canada. So right now it's a bit tricky, but they are able to come if they were pre-March 18th. And now if they're, let's say, starting studies in September, they can start those studies without a study permit. Obviously, they don't need it. They can study, let's say, abroad at home. And then when things do reopen and the travel ban is lifted, then they're able to apply for a study permit. Because right now, they can submit the application for their study permit, but 2 big things are not happening right now. One is biometric facilities are currently, most of them around the world are closed. They're starting to reopen slowly. So you're not able to get your study permit if you don't complete those biometrics. And the same, depending on what country they're from, they might have to do medical examinations. And the medical examination facilities are also closed at the moment. So what our firm has been advising our clients is that basically you can submit your application online and just have it in queue for when processing does reopen. But as of right now, they're not processing any new applications. And the Canadian government has actually said they're only processing essential services. So people that are coming into Canada for health services or, manufacturing, transportation, etc.
Right. Right. Well, that's a lot of information, and well, definitely some
Yes.
of the information is very comforting. It's good to know that looks like the Canadian government has some encouraging policies or rules for international students.